This is CHSR 97.9 FM here in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. This is Python's Paradise, your film and music show. And this is your host, Greg Gilbert, a.k.a. the Python Hyena. And folks, I have been a fan of Roddy Piper for over 30 years. And I was really heartbroken to hear of his passing in 2015. And but I have the pleasure and honor of having his son Colt and his daughter Ariel, Ariel Teal, Toombs, on the phone with me today, and to honor his memory and do a tribute to their dad. Thank you both for coming onto the show.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. I'm still trying to think what a python hyena looks like.
You know what? I get that question a lot, and I just happen to really like African wildlife. I've always
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've always loved snakes, and I know your dad didn't.
Mm-hmm.
But I've always loved snakes, and I like the hyena, and I guess snakes, they say, they kill more rodents than birds of prey and cats.
Wow.
Yep. And, of course, the hyena, they say they got stomachs like cast iron. They clean up the stuff that other scavengers cannot.
All right.
Learn something every day.
Yeah.
Well, they say a hyena would be right at home in a sewer, if you can imagine that. They eat even the bone.
Yeah. I've heard of like sewer crocodile, but sewer hyenas, that's the new one.
There you
That's the new one for me.
There you go. First off, Ariel, I have a question for you. I really like your name. Where did Teal come from? I never heard that before.
Thank you. I like it too. I don't think that my mom, especially, like, I know she got my first name from a soap opera she saw, but I think Teal she just liked. I don't think she got it from anything specific. I think she just thought it had a nice ring to it, and I love it. I mean,
yeah,
it's like my favorite color now, obviously, because it'd be silly for me to have a different favorite color.
So, Ariel, you're telling me that your dad wasn't a big Disney fan? You weren't named after a certain mermaid?
No, I was before that movie came out. And you know what's funny? We have an older sister named Anastasia, and she has a princess movie as well.
There you go. There you go.
Came out before those movies.
Poor Colt, you had 3 sisters. You were outnumbered?
I was outnumbered big time, plus a mom, obviously. So that's 4 girls, and Dad was on the road most of the time. So when Dad got home, we really had to team up against the women. You know, a lot of testosterone when Dad came home. Because one time, Dad came home, and I'm his only son. So, there's a lot of pride in an only son in a family. He came home, and the girls had dressed me up completely in this beautiful princess outfit. I had full makeup on. Coltina was the name. I had full makeup, this beautiful dress on, and Dad comes home and just looks at me. And that night, I went shooting for the first time. We had to do some serious manly stuff after that. But that was a regular occurrence, too, man. I mean, having 3 sisters and growing up with it, you become a big feminist. And I got to say, I had some of my best memories are with my sisters playing like that, man. We're such a close family. I mean, there's no shame in it whatsoever.
So your dad didn't come home and say, Adrian Adonis, you're alive?
No, he didn't.
I'm going to tell you both how I come to discover your dad. And yeah, and it actually happened through somebody else. You see, I'm going to go on record and say Wrestlemania 3 is by far the greatest WrestleMania of them all. It's never been matched, never been topped. It's the best. And it was a card just full of happenings. And every match on the card I thought was entertaining. And, I remember at that time, I didn't watch wrestling. But the closest I watched to wrestling was the Grand Prix wrestling here in town. And I thought it was interesting in your book, you mentioned Fredericton and New Brunswick and the Beast. I saw the Beast live.
Oh, wow.
Yep. I saw him in a chain match against Rock and Ron Starr, and the Beast made short work of him.
Wow.
Yep. But I didn't watch wrestling, and then somebody had a sticker. I guess at the time, at WrestleMania 3, they had 20 different stickers in the chip bags, and somebody had a sticker that grabbed my attention. It was of Jake the Snake Roberts, and of course, me being a snake lover, I gravitated towards that, and I was like, who's that? And they told me who it was, and they told me that he puts a snake on his opponents, and I was like, oh, I gotta see that. So immediately I said to my brothers, like, I gotta watch some wrestling. I gotta see this guy put the snake on these guys he puts down. And you'd never believe what was going through my head when these 20 different stickers came out. I was seeing characters like Kamala, George the Animal Steel, the Honky Tonk Man, Outback Jack. I was like, okay, there's some really weird people in this federation. So, and of course, your dad was on one as well. Now, I remember the first night I sat down at my cousin's with my older brother and my cousins watching wrestling. It was late one night. First night I ever watched it. I didn't see Jake the Snake that night, but I'll tell you what I did see. The main event of the night was a 6-man tag elimination match. And on one side, the heel side, you had the adorable Adrian Adonis. You had King Harley Race. And you had the gorgeous Miss Elizabeth leading out Randy Macho Man Savage. Ooh, yeah, dig it. And then on the face side, you had the Junkyard Dog with that dog collar around his neck. You had Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. And then they announced the guy who was retiring after WrestleMania 3, Roddy Piper. You guys remember that match?
Oh, yeah.
I was a bit young, but I do know of it now.
Didn't retire for long, did he?
No, he did not. That was his first of many. I think he just liked getting the watches. But here's the thing, and it's sad because only 2 of those 6 individuals are with us. Ricky Steamboat from the face side and Harley Race from the heel side. But, yeah, but I remember it came down to Roddy Piper and Randy Macho Man Savage. And I seem to remember Jesse the Body Ventura making a comment during the Steamboat Savage WrestleMania 3 Classic. He says, you got to be up awfully early to outsmart the Macho Man. So I'm assuming this match must have took place either at 12 a.m. or 1 a.m. really early because your dad outsmarted the Macho Man to win that match.
That was a common occurrence for Dad. He wasn't the biggest, he wasn't the strongest, but dang it, he was quick-witted, he could talk, and he was smart, man. He was meticulous about everything he did in that ring, man. That was truly one of his gifts, was how smart and how much he really understood the business.
And I became an instant fan of your dad's just based on that match. I liked his sense of humor.
He was so funny. I mean, you know, for as funny as he was in the ring and how quick-witted he was just like that in real life. I mean,
oh, yeah.
He was one of the most fun people to be around. That same sense of humor.
Well, I'm going to tell you, we had I read his first book that he did, and I read the one that the 2 of you done. I gotta say, well done. I really loved your book. I especially got a kick out of the scene where your dad slams his hands on the table and the table breaks.
Oh.
God. Yeah, my mom for years we didn't replace the table. We kept that broken table. It's in the book. And she kept the broken, like, jagged side that Dad would sit at facing him to remind him to control his temper. For years we had that table. We still have part of that table, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like stuff like that I found very funny to read. I'm just curious, like when you 2 were like babies, you know, did he ever take you on the road with him? Because like, did you ever have encounters like where he left you 2 to be like babysat by Nikolai Volkov and the Iron Sheik?
Colton, our dad was very old-fashioned, and Colt had more opportunities when he was younger to go with Dad because, frankly,
Well, I was his favorite.
You needed the most help, Colt.
Oh, that was a shot.
But yeah, so he didn't want to bring like his young daughters into the locker rooms and stuff like that. So Colt has a lot more of those experiences at a young age.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I traveled with Dad. I mean, about probably 4 years old was when the first time I started traveling with Dad. And I would take weeks and months off of school to go with him. And but you got to realize in the back of those locker rooms, when you're, only about 3 feet tall, you're 10 years old, it's a real scary place to be. But it was the funniest thing. I have about 13 uncles, and I mean, like, 5 dads, all from there, I had Uncle Rick, Uncle Bob, who's Sergeant Slaughter, and all these guys they truly made me feel like I was their son. Whatever wrestler was closest to me was the one taking care of me. So when Dad left, whoever was closest, I could ask anything, and they would literally bring me juice boxes. They were such kind men and looking out for me so much. There's so many times like that where I'm sitting there playing a Game Boy, picking my nose, and then here comes Uncle Rick with a Coke for me. It's a really incredible experience, especially when you're that young and impressionable. It's pretty cool.
Who's Uncle Rick?
My very first memory is of Sergeant Slaughter, who we call Uncle Bob. No one knows why.
I know.
Uncle Bob doesn't know why. Dad doesn't know why. We called him Uncle Bob. But yeah, Colton has a lot of uncles.
Who is Uncle Rick?
Uncle Rick is Ric Flair.
Oh, gee. I watched that, I got to bring this up, Wife Swap. Ric Flair might as well have gone out in the town with his flaring robes, because that disguise he had on was the worst.
It was ridiculous. Oh,
wow. Yeah, yeah, the book was great, and I'm going to tell you, your dad came in. Of course, he was a heel when he came into it, and he had some really classic bouts early. Of course, everybody remembers his feud with Jimmy Superfly Snuka, and it's sad we lost Snuka earlier this year.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not particularly too keen on where wrestling is now. My brother and I were watching wrestling at Christmas time, and we could barely make it through an hour. So we went back into the computer room, and we watched your dad and watched various other wrestlers and some of the classic bouts, because it's like that's what we wanted to see.
Absolutely. Wrestling's changed so much. And it's, they have like a 3-hour show going on now, too. That's hard for somebody that roller coaster ride. Your emotions go up and down so much for so long. It can be tiring. I mean, it's definitely changed a lot. They do a lot of great stuff, and, some stuff I don't quite agree with. But the old matches, and that's one of the great things, actually, about the WWE Network, is you can watch all the old WrestleManias and all the old matches, and it just really brings back those awesome, great times where wrestling was really in its prime,
Yeah. And, of course, your dad, I remember in his book, and I thought this was really gracious of him, tributed Cyndi Lauper as really the one who reeled in Wrestlemania.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I remember when that album She's So Unusual came out. I would have been, I think, like 11 years old, and I remember that well.
Well, that was one of the big things. Dad was one of the few people. He was such a big star and so huge in the wrestling world, but he didn't have the ego. He was willing to give credit where credit was due. And at that time, wrestling was really blowing up and being huge. And obviously, Cyndi Lauper's career was really blowing up and being huge. And what it did is it helped both parties. And this is what is just incredibly smart of what they did back then. Cyndi brought her entire MTV fan base over to wrestling, and wrestling brought all of their fan base over to MTV. And it made this mesh of worlds that worked so good and really made wrestling skyrocket back then. I mean, it was such a brilliant move.
I think that it really helped transcend it just from being a sport to being sports entertainment and really bringing in audiences that maybe wouldn't have thought to watch wrestling before because maybe they're just not a big sports family. Really appreciate the entertainment aspect of it, which of course is the part of it our dad was so great at.
Mm-hmm.
Did your dad have a favorite Cyndi Lauper song?
Our dad was kind of more touchy-feely than people think. I think he really loved that song True Colors and Time After Time.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
He loved the kind of...
One, maybe Time After Time more,
Yeah, maybe. He was one of the guys, though, he didn't listen to, like, hardcore rock and roll or what you think Roddy Piper would listen to. He loved the songs that made you feel something, like True Colors, things you could relate to. And that I would say the exact same two songs, Ariel. That you were spot on.
Well, I remember watching the video for Goonies, and of course, Captain Lou Albano was always playing Cyndi Lauper's dad. And we remember girls just want to have fun or twisting Albano's arm behind his back, and the funny stuff like that. I remember watching that video for Goonies, and all these heel wrestlers in it, and your dad was in it. There was one part of the video, I don't know whether you can answer this, but I gotta wonder whether it was improvised, because there's a moment in the video where Cyndi kicks Roddy Piper in the shin, and then she sings, and then she goes over and she kicks the Iron Sheik.
No.
Yeah, I don't know if that was improvised or not. I would give Cyndi Lauper that credit because she is that quick-witted that she could do that. But one thing a lot of people don't know is when Dad and Cyndi Lauper first started working together, they became incredible friends. And also our mom as well is still in touch with Cyndi, and they talk all the time. And they came really, really close. So I believe that it probably would have been improvised because Cyndi and Dad were so comfortable together because they've had this relationship outside of work in the ring that she could, I can kick him in the shin and he's going to know what to do. He's not going to get mad or nothing like that. They were so close at the time. That's the way I kind of see it, but I don't know for sure, Yeah.
Actually, I was wondering if it was improvised when she kicked the Sheik.
Could have been. Could have been. My mom just told me a real cool story, actually, when Cyndi, when her first, for Girls Want to Have Fun, when that album came out, Mom and her dad was gone, and Mom and Cyndi were in an apartment together, and Cyndi was going over the songs with Mom of what she should put and should not put on the CD. I actually just recently heard that story for the first time from my mom. It was kind of a cool thing that Mom got to experience, too, with all that, and I think that's why her and Cyndi are so close still.
My favorite Cyndi song was When You Were Mine. I like that one a lot.
Me too. Prince wrote that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I actually have been looking into doing a cover of it for a while because I just love that song. But yeah, I think Prince wrote it originally, but I love her version of it so much.
Yeah,
I don't know why, but I've always loved Iko Iko. It's one of my favorite. I don't know why. It's even on my gym playlist. It's like the weirdest thing to be on a playlist for the gym, but I put it on and I just go crazy to it. I don't know why, but I love that one.
It's a good one.
It is.
Well, I got to mention some of I wanted to talk about the various WrestleManias your dad was in, but he had even before WrestleMania some of the great opponents. Jimmy Snuka and he, for having such a massive feud. It was really, when your dad passed away, of course, Snuka was going through stomach cancer. And I do know that his wife had done an interview and spoke that Snuka was very, very saddened to hear about it. And I guess they had a really, really good working relationship.
They did, absolutely. When Dad hit Jimmy with the coconut, it was so much bigger than either of them could ever imagined. It blew both of them up, and obviously at that point they were both huge stars. Mm-hmm. But that instance really blew them both up, and so there was always a mutual respect there of what they had done for each other. And they stayed close for a very long time. I know a few years ago my dad was going through some hard times, and Snuka was one of the guys that he would call regularly. And I know when Snuka had some hard times, he would do it vice versa. They always not only had a mutual respect, but they were really close. But you got to realize, too, back then, these guys are all on the road together for 300-plus days out of the year. Mm-hmm. And that, the reason why all of us wrestlers call each other brother is because it truly is a fraternity of brothers. I mean, you could hate the guy, but if somebody's going to stab him in the back, you're going to stop him no matter what. It's truly a family. It really is.
I got to point out something, though. You made one mistake in your book.
What?
Well, you said that
was Ariel's section.
Oh.
Ariel wrote that part.
You dick.
No, when Snuka leaped off the cage, he did do it to Bob Backlund, but Bob Backlund moved out of the way. It was Dom Morocco that he hit with the big splash off the top of the cage.
Well, don't you know you're wrestling? Is that the only mistake mistake we found?
That was one I noticed, but Piper made a mistake too, because Piper said in his book that Morocco kicked out of it. Morocco did not kick out of that.
Well, you got to realize, though, you're talking about the televised match. Back then, just like with the dog collar match with Dad and Greg Valentine, you saw one of them. They did that match about 14, 15 times in all the territories. So it could have got mixed up as well. I mean, that's me covering my own butt. But...
No,
there were so many matches they had.
That many matches.
Yeah, right.
His memory was very cloudy. I swear, sometimes he would watch himself on, like, somebody would show him an old clip, and he would be like, "I don't remember being there," but
yeah, right. That's not me.
I know, not me. No, look, Roddy. Oh, hey.
Exactly.
And of course, that dog collar, that Starrcade was really what I think really gave the idea for WrestleMania to Vince McMahon, because Starrcade blew up so big. You had Harley Race and Ric Flair in the cage match, and you had Roddy Piper and Greg the Hammer Valentine in that grueling dog collar match.
Mm-hmm. And you know what's funny? Dad, the promoter told Dad, this is all he told him. He said, "I want you to come up with the most brutal match you possibly can." So Dad took about a week. He's like, "Oh, brilliant. I'm going to get some dog collars, make them an inch thick, and get a truck pulling chain, make it 15 feet long. We're going to tie dog collars to each other and fight." But he didn't know the promoter meant that match was for Dad. So when Dad gave him this, he actually stole it back and then put sheep's wool on the inside of the collar to make it more comfortable, which ended up giving him and Greg Valentine this gigantic rash because they had to do the match so many times.
Valentine, of course, like Ric Flair, did those great nosedives.
Oh, man.
Yeah, Valentine, though, would do it differently. He would timber over and just land on his face.
Just like a giant oak tree falling, huh?
Yeah. And, of course, your dad had a match with Andre the Giant. And I'm going to tell you, back then, like, I watched Andre manhandle the Iron Sheik like he was nothing. Piper, the match I saw, Piper kind of took the same road that Ken Patera did. He bailed after so much punishment.
Dad and Andre were really, really close too. They had a great respect for each other, because Andre was a guy who didn't like to come off the ground. And when you're that big, I mean, it's very uncomfortable for you to come off the ground. Mm-hmm. And one thing Andre used to do is he'd actually sit down on the middle turnbuckle when Dad was firing on him in the corner. And they actually worked together so much prior to the WWE that they were real close and knew how to work together real good. And this is what Dad always told me. Andre always had a real respect for Dad and always felt very, very comfortable in the ring with Dad. A comfort he didn't have with many other wrestlers, just because Dad understood kind of what he was going through. He had a real respect for his size and knew at any time, this guy can throw me 100 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And your dad fought what I consider the greatest champion the WWE ever had, and that is Bruno Sammartino. I have great respect for
Sold out Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, wow. They fought in a cage match as well.
That's right. The first time I met Mr. Sammartino, last time they were together, my dad called him a wop, which is obviously not a nice name for him. And the first thing Mr. Sammartino says to me, I come up to him like, "Hello, sir. I'm Colt. I'm Mr. Piper's son. My dad wanted me to come over and say hi." He goes, "Oh, your dad. Last time I saw him, he called me a wop." I'm 15 years old. Like, what am I going to say to that? Yes, sir.
I apologize, sir.
I'm so sorry for my dad's actions.
Well, Bruno, Bruno just couldn't retire. Like, he ended up coming back, feuded with your dad, feuded with Randy Savage, the Honky Tonk Man. Finally, he was able to retire.
And I believe when Dad and Mr. Sammartino did their run, Bruno was about 50 years old. He wasn't a young man. And then they went Madison Square Garden and sold it out back to back to back. I mean, when you see him, too, even at his age, he is such a strong and just solid individual. Like, it's just a true man's man. It's incredible.
I think in WrestleMania 1, it was a mistake not to make the David Sammartino Brutus Beefcake match a tag team match. I think it should have been both David and Bruno versus Beefcake and Johnny Valiant. That was a mistake in booking there, I think.
Really?
Yep. Because I think that this, instead of a double disqualification, I think the San Martinos could have taken the win.
Would have been interesting. That's
Yeah.
for sure.
I don't know. I feel like those first 3 WrestleManias did such a good job launching everything.
Yeah.
Oh man.
You know what I mean? Like, if they made a mistake, it still worked out pretty well.
Well, I got to say, that
Yeah,
main
fine.
event, I never understood why they kept Jimmy Snuka and Cowboy Bob Orton on the outside. Because Snuka was majorly popular. And I would have thought they'd either put those two in a singles match together or make the match. I would have made the match a 6-man tag elimination.
Wow.
Yeah.
And see, that's hard though, because back then, I mean, I agree with having them on the outside with such great talents is possibly a mistake, but back then, when they were the first WrestleMania, everything was so crazy. It was either going to make or break wrestling, and they had so many stars. Then every star deserved a singles match. They were all main event quality. So if you would put them into a 6-man tag, they couldn't have shined individually as they needed to in order to launch WrestleMania as it was. So I feel that they might have not done it because of that. And in my opinion, I was obviously just my humble.
Yeah, I mean, they were all the biggest stars from various territories, and they were tried and true, and it would almost
Exactly.
It would almost be an insult, I think.
For sure, especially in that first WrestleMania where it's make or break. Everybody wants to see their main star in a singles match, and that was why every single match was as good as the main event, because those guys every single one was the best from their territory.
And they
did
to be viewed, individually. I think for their talent, especially in that first WrestleMania where it was so critical.
Exactly. Not saying the 6-man tag would have been awesome to watch though.
Yeah, no, that would have been fun.
Oh yeah.
Well, your dad, of course, was, for a while teamed up with Dr. D. David Schultz, and I guess prior to WrestleMania, situations happened where he ended up leaving. But he did have Paul Mr. Wonderful Orndorff with that cool hair. Yeah, and I thought he and Orndorff were actually a really decent pairing, and I actually preferred them over Hogan and Mr. T, to be honest.
Mr. Orndorff, he's another guy. It's just a different breed, hard worker. I saw him a while ago, and he was, he's still working out, still in shape. And he was one of the guys that Dad always told me, if you're gonna be like somebody, try to be like Mr. Wonderful. He was truly great at what he did, and him and Dad as a pair, that was just phenomenal, man. They killed it.
What was so I take it your dad really enjoyed working with Paul, not just as a partner, but even in their matches together after WrestleMania.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, and of course, your dad had stated in interviews before that he's the reason Hulk Hogan doesn't have any hair.
Yep.
How great it was Piper beat Hogan in a steel cage match.
That's one of my favorite things. So Dad was the heel, right? And Hogan was the babyface. Mm-hmm. So Hogan was on the cereal boxes. Hogan was on, all the merchandise, that kind of stuff. But one of the things the Pipers will always have over the Hogans is my dad pinned yours and yours never pinned mine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, Yeah, that, of course, we all know, of course, the situation with Mr. T. He was not exactly favored by a whole lot of people going into that. I understand why they brought him in, because, ticket buys and whatnot, but I guess...
He was such a big star. With the A-Team and everything, he was huge at the time.
Yeah. But I guess... your dad ended up getting stuck with him through not one, but 2 WrestleManias. And I know he said in his first book that if there's one match he could take back, it would be that boxing match at WrestleMania 2.
It was a really hard situation, because obviously bringing Mr. T as a promoter in, or bringing Mr. T in, it was very smart. Obviously he had a huge following. But back then, the rules were so much more strict for the locker room. Like, you couldn't, if you brought Joe Schmo into the wrestling world and he got over on the biggest champion, so if, he had pinned Dad, then what's that say for Dad, who, is a lifelong fighter? It really diminished who you were, and you didn't do that back then. So that was really the first time on a huge stadium, or, a huge stage, that they brought a talent in from a different area and let him get over. And that's why it was very clever, because Mr. T didn't win, Dad didn't really win, or nobody got pinned or knocked out. And so both of them got over in their own way. And even though there was a lot of heat between them at the time, they both kind of sucked it up and made sure they did what was best for the business. They didn't do what was best for themselves. They did what was best for wrestling. And even though there was a lot of heat, there was so much respect between them for what they did. I mean, it's such a hard situation. And seeing from Dad, not wanting to bring an outsider in, imagine being Mr. T and coming into this thing that's like a carnival, where people they're all fighting for each other, hate you, and he has to come in and box one of you. That's a hard position to be in.
A lot of people don't know this, but Dad actually started in boxing. He's a very
talented
boxer. Before he really developed his wrestling skills, he was a boxer. And I always enjoy that match because you can actually see a lot of his technique. And, I mean, he was very quick. And poor Mr. T is like, of course Rowdy's a boxer.
Of course he is, right?
Why wouldn't he be? All right.
But, it's funny. Dad and Mr. T never really talked after that until I believe it was 2000. Ooh, I'm going to be off on this. 2010, 2011, that we were at one of the Hall of Fames where Mr. T was there being inducted. And they hadn't talked since, and there was such a mutual respect. When they came and talked, there was not a bad word said between them. It was like, how are you doing, sir? Sir, I'm great. I mean, so many sirs were said. It was crazy. And it was a really cool thing to see, though. Two guys with such a great story that everybody knows about, and how much heat and how much they really hated each other back then. To see them come so many years later, shake each other's hands and say, yeah, man, we kicked ass. No matter how we did it, we did it. It was pretty dang cool to see. That was pretty remarkable.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I heard Mr. T had made a statement, too, after your dad had passed away, and it was nice to hear him say that, because he was asked whether they had made peace, and he said that they had, and he said some really nice things about your dad.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, they definitely, I think especially with a lot of these relationships from the 80s and the 70s that the wrestlers had, I think that after WrestleMania got so big and WWE and WWF and their careers went on, I think a lot of that young sort of male ego of trying to get over in all the territories and you can't take that big of personalities and stick them in the same room and expect them to get along. It's just not going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
Over the years, they just grew such a mutual respect for each other, as well as, whether you like someone or not, there's something to be said for longevity of a career, and I think that they both, Mr. T and Dad are a great example, recognize that, we were both young and hot-headed and, but we had a great match, and my God, look at our careers and how great they went, and it's cool to see you here and still alive and still healthy and all of that.
Yeah. Couldn't have said it better, Ariel. That was perfect.
And it's interesting because your dad was always known as a heel, but he spent most of his career as a face. And of course, when he came back after a break from WrestleMania, he had a feud with the adorable Adrian Adonis. And I remember when Adrian Adonis had passed away. And, you want to talk about somebody that took what could have been an embarrassing gimmick, and he just made it his own. I remember Adrian Adonis cut a promo on the Junkyard Dog, and it was just one of the funniest promos I ever heard, And I understand, I was reading your book, and I was like, I had no idea how close Piper and Adonis really were.
A lot of people really didn't. And there's actually an episode, I can't remember the name of the show, it's something like Ghost Hunters or the Ghost thing, where Dad had an instance with Adrian Adonis. But people don't realize that he was truly a brother to Dad. Dad and him got along so well. And we were actually driving once on the road, and we were driving on the highway on an overpass. And the gentleman driving us said, hey, this is where Adrian Adonis died. And Dad made him slam the brakes on, stop in the middle of the highway. And Dad spent about 30 minutes in the spot that Adrian died, just looking around, thinking, praying to him and talking to him. It's really crazy how close they really were.
Yeah, and they put on a great WrestleMania 3 bout. I don't know whatever happened to Adonis after that. I don't know whether he and Beefcake had a feud, whether that happened, but I know that that was the night Brutus Beefcake became the barber and Adonis became Humpty Dumpty, as Jesse Ventura said. But Adonis gave your dad a really nice first retirement send-off.
And speaking of Adrian Adonis, that's one of the things that's really cool about professional wrestling. So every other professional sport, there is so many dang egos, and nobody wants to have egg on their face. Nobody wants to look stupid. But in professional wrestling, we just don't care, man. We don't care if you think we're stupid or whatever. If it's what we feel is right, we're going to do it. Like Adrian with all the makeup, dressing in the dresses, he didn't care, and he put on one hell of a show. I mean, nobody knew that when he turned into that was going to take off. It just happened to take off. And so he stuck with it because that's what the people wanted, and there was no shame. He rocked it, man. That's something that I feel is very intricate or very special in professional wrestling is, we do what the fans want when they want, no matter what it does to us or how we look. We do it for the fans. We're not there to be, superstars. We're just there to have fun and entertain.
And Dad's a great example of that with, you were talking about how he was a babyface for a long time after he was a heel, yet people still talk of him as being a heel. And I think a lot of that is, he really knew that his job was to make the fans hate him, and nobody was better at it than Dad. And he did not care how it affected his personal life. And it did. It definitely affected his personal life. And, people flat out attacked him all the time, especially in those days. And it was so impactful that it's carried on all of these years. People still associate him as a heel, even though he was also a babyface. And it's sort of a very unusual combination that doesn't occur a lot in wrestling, or at least didn't. And,
right.
But again, it was just like with Colt staying with Adonis, it didn't matter to him how it affected his personal life or what people thought of him, because his job was to be hated. So if people were spitting on him on the streets when he left the arena, then he did his job right, and he did a good job for the fans to get the babyface over.
Exactly.
It worked for Adonis. I know that it didn't work for the Red Rooster, though. The gimmick didn't help. But WrestleMania 5, of course, your dad came back and had a great Piper's Pit episode with Morton Downey Jr. and Brother Love. I often wondered, what it would have been like if they had to have Piper and Brother Love have a tuxedo match and then see Brother Love going up that aisle there in his underwear.
You know what's funny? Dad, when Dad sprayed him with the fire extinguisher, there was 2 fire extinguishers side by side, and what they had done is they had emptied one halfway so that Dad couldn't get them so well. And Dad was just smart, and he was keen to it. He made sure he grabbed the full one. So when he hit Downey with that, he had no idea it was coming full blast on him, and Dad just let it rip, which was his style, right? And it makes another great moment. So many photos of that are just stills of history that's just so much better. If Dad hadn't just done that one little move of grabbing the right fire extinguisher, it could have been totally different.
And of course, like with Bobby the Brain Heenan, of course, your dad called him Boobsy. And of course, with Brother Love, he called him Blubber Love. He put Brother Love through so many humiliating.
Oh, man.
Do you two have any favorites?
Oh, the diaper, by far. Putting him in the diaper and having the collar on him. Oh, man, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, that was pretty hilarious.
Yeah, I think actually there's I know. I think that's the one we actually put in the book, that picture, because that's just one of those moments that was just, again, a guy being humiliated and doing it with a smile on his face because he loves pro wrestling. Brother Love, man, another great one, who does a really, really good Roddy Piper impression. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but he does a dang good one.
Yeah. And, of course, WrestleMania 6, he took on Bad News Brown. I will never figure out why that match ended in a double countout, because I would have given Piper the win.
Well, of course, we would have, too.
I never got that, why it was a double countout.
We're always told to tell people, and I think this applies to this match just like many others. Wrestling, I can't tell you if it's real or fake, but what I can tell you is all the matches where Dad did not win was definitely fake.
Absolutely.
That's how you know when it's, so it was probably very planned since he didn't win.
Right. I mean, that was such a controversial one, too, because that's when he painted himself half black. So that was such a big, there was so much more than just that match going on. I mean, a lot of people thought that Dad did that trying to be a heel and trying to be racist going against Bad News Brown, but it couldn't have been further from the truth. Dad did that to show that he was every man. It didn't matter if you were black or white or whatever you were. You could love him or you could root for him. It didn't matter who you wanted to root for, what they looked like, what color they were. That's the reason Dad did that, which is totally different than the way it kind of it went over in most people's heads.
It worked well for the heel aspect. And it's
man.
because for me, that's a very nostalgic memory of fatherhood. When we were little, because that match, I'm sure we talk about it in the book if you haven't heard my dad tell the story before, but basically some of the wrestlers decided to take out the special solvent that would take the blackface off.
Andre the Giant?
Yep.
And so he couldn't get the makeup off, and he went through God knows how much traveling back to us with a giant Mickey Mouse doll he had bought for us, which he had to buy a first-class ticket for, this giant Mickey Mouse doll, and he's painted half black and he can't get it off. And people, he said he would just walk and people just parted seas in the airport. Like, everyone was just like, who is this guy? But it's so funny because to me, I just think of that Mickey Mouse doll he brought home and how much he loved us. And, after everything he went through, he paid Lord knows how much for that suit, for that Mickey Mouse doll to bring it home to his kids.
Now, WrestleMania 7, of course, he was in the corner of Virgil. And I want to know, did he actually legitimately have an accident with his leg, or was that just for show?
Dad wasn't one of the guys that not necessarily faked, but Dad didn't really fake injuries. If there was something, he may have played up injuries, but he never really faked them. And when he hurt his leg, it was actually the same leg. He ended up getting hip replaced, a full hip replacement a few years later. So, it was probably something along, obviously I don't know for sure, but I'm going to guess with Dad, it's probably something like, he hit it, it stung, and then he, it obviously actually hurt, so hey, I'm going to go with it. And he always told me, because obviously I do wrestling and all that fun stuff, and he always told me, stay as close to the truth as you possibly can. If you're one of these guys that just makes up all these lies about yourself and just makes anything up, it's impossible to keep track, and it's so much harder to pretend these lies. If you keep things close to home and make your character close to what you are and make things close to your life, it's so much easier to get it over because you actually have the emotions that go with that traumatic event or that trauma to your body. Dad wasn't the kind that really faked injuries. That wasn't his cup of tea.
And Lord knows he didn't need to with as many injuries.
Oh, man. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, he was in the corner of Virgil, the $1 Million Man. I saw on YouTube he and the $1 Million Man were doing a signing, and I joked with somebody. I was wondering if the $1 Million Man was trying to raise money so he could make Santa with muscles the reboot.
We did a thing in Scotland with Dad and Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man. It was real fun. They did I think it was $1 million haggis, and then Dad had some kind of another famous Scottish meal. It was just hilarious to watch them two trying to sell as many of these as possible for a charity. The two were just going at it. It was the funniest thing you ever seen. They're great salesmen.
And of course, WrestleMania 8, he took on Bret Hart. I actually saw Bret Hart live. I actually saw Owen Hart live too, when they performed here in Fredericton one time. But Bret Hart, I remember coming out the back way, and I actually reached out and I touched his shoulder, and it felt like solid rock.
Oh, yeah. Solid guy.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting that the WrestleMania 8 match, that was planned in Moncton.
Yeah, so WrestleMania 8 was a big one, and that was a big thing for Dad as well, because Dad, up until that point, for the most part, had been considered more of a brawler than a technical wrestler.
Yeah.
And in that match with Bret Hart, there was a very technical match. There was a lot of moves, a lot of counters, a lot of offensive and defensive escapes. It was one of the first times Dad really was able to showcase his wrestling ability with somebody with an equal wrestling ability like Bret Hart, who's a phenomenal technical wrestler. So it was a big, big move for Dad. And Dad and Bret always had a very special relationship. They obviously both from Canada, and they just always felt very, very close to each other. And for Dad to actually let Bret pin him was a very, very big move for Dad to do.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Colt, but isn't that Dad's favorite match?
That is the one that Dad always considered his favorite.
He had so much respect for Bret, and he really enjoyed getting into the technical aspect, like Colt was just saying.
Exactly.
I thought it was funny the story you guys told about Bret Hart bleeding and what took place, especially since Savage and Flair got fined.
That's right. Because at that time, you weren't supposed to bleed or cut yourself. But at certain points, there's a place. So if everybody cuts himself in wrestling, they obviously the crowd gets numb to it. And at that point, they were trying to shy away from the blood and that kind of stuff. Obviously, the networks, they were getting on bigger networks at that point, and blood was just not something they wanted kids to see.
And more family friendly.
Exactly. And so when Dad and Bret decided to do that, it was an instance where Bret literally looked at Dad and he said, "I think I should cut myself." And Dad looked at him and said, "I was going to say the exact same thing." For two wrestlers to be on the same page about something just like that, it's hard. And so it was such a big moment, and you know what? They went for it. That's the great thing about Dad, too. He didn't care what the office thought. He did what was best for the business, and that's what Bret did, too, man. And sure, I mean, I don't believe they got fined. I don't recall that. But, yeah, it was a big deal, man. It really was.
Because Flair bled in the Savage match, and I guess they got in trouble.
Bleeds, though.
Flair always bleeds. Well, it's kind of hypocritical because when Hogan and Vince fought at WrestleMania 19, they both bled. Now, like, where's Vince's fine, you know?
Right.
Yeah. But, yeah, that was a great match with Bret. I wonder, what did your dad think of the Montreal Screwjob?
You know, I don't really, I don't know. He never really brought it up too much on his opinion, but I know because of how close him and Bret were that anytime somebody does something like that, where, getting pinned when you're not supposed to, especially because in that instance, from what I know and from my knowledge, Bret just didn't want to give up the title in his hometown.
No.
Completely understandable. You want to save face in your hometown, and he was willing to give up the title, in the next town. And then when, the whole Montreal Screwjob happened, I know it's real hard anytime. We put a lot of trust in each other in that ring. I mean, we are trusting you with our lives. You're going to lift me up and throw me on my head 5-6 times during this match. I have to trust you. So anytime that trust is broken, I know it's a big deal. And obviously, I wasn't there. I'm just talking about what I've heard over the years from the guys. But I believe Dad, if all that stuff is true of what they say, I believe Dad would have been on Bret's side. I mean, there's no instance where I believe Dad would go against Bret. He truly loved him.
I'm going to tell you,
absolutely.
I do not like Shawn Michaels. And I'm going to tell you something he did. I don't know if this is on the pay-per-view, but he took the Canadian flag and desecrated it before the match. Yep, he rubbed it on his crotch. He spit on it. And I'm surprised he did not get his ass handed to him by people in the audience. I had some...
Sorry. That's a hard one. I mean, there's a thing called red heat and white heat. Basically, one is where, you get the proper amount of heat, people hate you, and the other one is when people riot. And so that was an instance where, it definitely maybe was taken a little far, but at the same time, I mean, Shawn Michaels, Mr. WrestleMania, has one of the best decorated careers there is. The guy was smart in knowing what he was doing. So, just because we didn't quite agree with it, you remember that moment, don't you? That's one of the moments that made you hate him. And when he was heel, that was his job. So it's hard to say because, the guy, it's a hard thing to do to the Canadian flag. Obviously, we're half Canadian. We love Canada. But at the same time, you remember the moment and you'll never forget it. So he did his job. So it's real hard, man. There's a gray area in there it's just very difficult. And I mean, it's rough, but he hit it.
Well, yeah. And then your dad refereed, I know, a couple of matches for WrestleMania, including the Bret Hart-Bob Backlund match and one between Bret Hart and Yokozuna. But then he was back with to take on Goldust. And I guess Goldust, very, very thankful to your dad doing this match because I guess Razor Ramon was supposed to be his opponent, and Razor Ramon kind of stepped out of this for whatever reason. But Roddy Piper did the backlot brawl. It was a strange match, but I guess they clicked really well. And I found it interesting that your dad, according to the WrestleMania books, I guess he's had 2 victories at WrestleMania, one over Adonis and one over Goldust. I'm like, he beats the cross-dressers.
That was an interesting one. I don't know why Scott Hall, I don't know why he wasn't able to do it, but I mean, I'm glad he didn't because the backlot brawl was such a big one. I mean, first off, mimicking the OJ chase was awesome. Mm-hmm. And one of the things, Dad was supposed to hit Goldust's car right in the back real hard, but prior to that, he had agreed that he gets to keep the Bronco. So Dad, knowing he gets the Bronco afterwards, thinks, I'm just going to hit the door off instead of ruin the dang car. But the backlot brawl, so memorable. Dad had broken his hand in that fight right in the beginning. And Goldust was still pretty young and pretty new back then. And it was a match that put Goldust over, put Dad over. It was such a cool thing. And when Dad ripped off Goldust's suit, Goldust came back through the gorilla position and gave me that suit that he got ripped off and autographed it for me. And I still have it to this day.
You know what's weird, because Roddy Piper won that match, but I don't understand. I think Wikipedia has it listed as a draw. But Piper won that match, didn't he?
As far as I can recall, yeah. I also remember him kissing him, unfortunately.
Was your dad uncomfortable with that?
Dad, no, Dad.
I'm so confused. I was like,
I know.
Married to mommy?
Mama, why? Oh, I can't remember the finish for that match off the top of my head, but I feel like Dad won.
Yeah, your dad did win.
That's how I remember it, but
I know Goldust ran from the ring at the end of it. I don't think there was.
That's right.
Yep. So I don't understand. There's been some places listed as a draw. I know the WrestleMania books I've read through WWE list Piper as the winner. So I personally think your dad should have had the Bad News Brown win. And I'm going to tell you one match I was offended with. In fact, I saw this WrestleMania 25 in the theater. I almost got out and walked out when they had the Chris Jericho versus your dad, Jimmy Snuka, and Ricky Steamboat. Number one, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat did a phenomenal job doing all the stuff that he did 30 years ago and still able to do those things. Kudos to him. I think
he's one of the guys that stayed in great shape, and he was able to carry, take the heat, do some of the high spots where some of the guys like Dad with a little more injuries couldn't. And Ricky Steamboat, what an incredible athlete.
Yep.
I mean, when you're of an older age like that and you're still able to move like that, that's incredible.
Yeah. And a lot of the reviews were criticizing your dad and Jimmy Snuka. I'm just going to go on the record. Jimmy Snuka, they say, before this match, the Fabulous Moolah was the oldest wrestler to perform at a WrestleMania. Snuka broke that record. Now, Snuka obviously wasn't going to be jumping off the top rope and doing a splash on Jericho. He did what he could, and I think he was out there to entertain the fans. So, I kind of go easy on Snuka there. But nobody ever mentions some of the risk your dad did. I've never seen your dad do a sunset flip. He did in that match.
Yep.
And he went over the top rope and he caught his arm. And I'm like, holy cow.
His arm actually got caught in that too. So
yeah.
When you go over and the ropes twist, it was a thing where Dad's arm actually got caught. He was actually stuck at that point. I remember him telling me about that, and he came home with these incredible burns and bruises from the ropes on his arm.
yeah.
But where I felt insulted, and this is where I would put my foot down, it was, and I got nothing against Chris Jericho, I think he's a fine athlete. But I know Jimmy Snuka said in his book he wishes he could have won a WrestleMania. He's 0-3 for some weird reason. But if it had have been up to me, the Legends would have won that match. And a lot of people have said that Jericho did not need the win. And I got to say, and even afterwards, he attacks Ric Flair after the match, and then he gets knocked out by Mickey Rourke. And I found it, I took it like a slap in the face as a fan of the Legends.
That's a hard one, because those, especially in the era of those gentlemen, like Snuka, Dad, Mr. Steamboat, those guys, they have had all the glory in the world. They didn't need it anymore, and no matter if they won or lost, they were willing to put over Chris Jericho, who is an incredible talent.
Yes,
Chris Jericho
does
some amazing stuff. But that's the old school way. They were on their way out of the business, and they wanted to put over the new young gun coming up. Sure, Chris Jericho didn't need it, but at the end of the match, what was accomplished was Chris Jericho obviously got over. They won that match. But the Legends did too. Everybody cheered for the Legends. Everybody loved the Legends. They didn't lose anything. There was no egg on their face. And Chris Jericho, got a huge boost from it. That's just the old school way, man. They didn't care about winning or losing. They wanted to make sure the business had a life after them. And that's what they were trying to accomplish.
Well, I thought the three Legends did a really good job. I kind of wish your dad had got at least one more WrestleMania win before,
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
I even too when he did that Piper's Pit with Carlito showing up. It would have been funny seeing him and Carlito have a match.
Oh yeah, me and Dad, because I got into pro wrestling about 4 years ago, give or take.
Hmm.
And one of the big things when Dad was training me is he wanted to have one last match as a tag match with me and him, and we talked about it constantly. We were always trying to kind of fit it in somewhere, and we never had the opportunity to. But that's what he always wanted his final match to be, was a tag match with me and him, which would have been just freaking awesome. But just it never came to pass. That's one of those things, man. I would have loved Dad to, have another great match with or without me, but unfortunately, we lost him too soon. But there's still plenty of great ones to remember.
Is there any chance that you're going to take on Mr. T?
Oh man, I don't want to get my butt kicked. That's the thing about fighting those guys. Like my father, for instance, I could never beat him because he knows every trick in the book. He's been through the ringer a dozen times, and Mr. T as well, man. As much as I'd like to say I'm good enough to beat him, I'd probably get my butt kicked.
Well, Ariel, I saw some video of you going out in the street with some female putting sleeper holds on her.
What? Oh no, I forgot about that. Yeah, that was a fun story. My father had I know how to do the sleeper hold because of that. It was for a show, and these girls wanted me to. Basically, it was like a prank show, and they wanted me to choke out them in line on the street and watch people react and stuff. And it was really weird. I'm like, I probably wouldn't do it again because people really were freaked out. Even after they found out it was a show, people were really like, oh my God, stop that woman, stop that woman. I was like, it's a show, look, cameras. Like people were really upset by it. And it really freaked me out because that was my first experience doing that. But I had fun, and my dad and I worked on that move, the week before, because I was like, I never actually, I knew the idea of it, but I never actually executed it all the way. So I wanted to make sure I could do it right. But I had a good teacher. I mean, if you want someone to teach you the sleeper hold, it's Roddy Piper.
Well,
Darn right.
I was just kind of thinking, I had this theory that of Ariel Teal Toombs versus Tamina Snuka, and there's a coconut involved.
That would be fun, as long as I'm not the one getting hit with the coconut.
That's not the idea.
Snuka's revenge.
Snuka's revenge.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring up some of your dad's. Yeah. I wanted to bring up some of your dad's movies, because he. I know after he had passed away, the one way I was able to pay my respects, they played The Masked Saint at the theater for one night, and I went and I saw that, and it was one of those nice faith-based movies. Most of those are not very good, but this one was, and I come from a Christian home, so it was nice to see your dad in something like that, and. It was. I know at the end of it, it was dedicated to his memory. But yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. What was you going to say?
I was just going to say, he was so excited to do that film. He had obviously been doing tons and tons of indie work and all sorts of film the last, 10 years or so since he had been pulling back more and more from wrestling, and. He really loved the art of film and everything, but more than that, he was very religious. Like, a lot of people don't realize, and we get into it in the book, but he was very old-fashioned, and he came from a strict religious family, and so that was always something that he took very seriously. And to get a role that was just so perfect for him, as well as was, kind of had their Bible agenda going on and everything like that. Like, my dad was so happy to do it, and our whole family really feels that, like, if that's the last movie that he can be remembered by, then he would be happy with that.
Absolutely.
It was a role that he truly took a lot of pride in.
And it was very different for Dad too, because he spent most of his life hating promoters, and in that movie he played the promoter, so it was very different for him.
And he also had, the amount of you can't buy that kind of experience as an actor. My dad knew promoters inside and outside through years and years and years, and every kind of sports promoter, the old school, the new school. So, he couldn't have been more prepared for that role when you think about it. And, you know, I always felt that he was not fully appreciated as an actor.
I agree.
He was a very phenomenal talent, and I don't think a lot of the industry really picked up on that.
It's interesting you say that, because the other night I interviewed somebody just before I called you, Ariel, to try to confirm over the interview. This completely slipped my mind. I interviewed somebody who directed your dad.
Really? Do you know what his name was?
Well, yeah, I know. I forgot the name of the person I know. I interviewed Paul Lynch, who directed your dad in No Contest.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
Yeah, well, I was connected with him through another interviewee, and we were talking about the original Prom Night because it was shot here in Canada. And I was looking through his credits, and I had not seen No Contest. And I noticed that your dad was in it, so I asked him about your dad, and he said the most gracious, nice things about working with your father in that film.
Oh, that's really sweet. Yeah, you know, Dad, I always felt that, especially towards his retirement as he got older and stuff, he really appreciated the art of acting and film and really, really loved it. And it was almost, in a way, it was almost like how he was in the beginning with wrestling, in the sense that it was still kind of fresh and new, even though he had been doing it a long time. He wasn't, you know, he had done everything he could do in wrestling, and he hadn't got that far in his acting career. So he really, you know, I think he really had, what do you call it? Not sugar goggles. He had a very fresh, feeling towards it. I'm not wording it right, but I think you're getting what I'm trying to say.
No, and that's what Dad, usually when a star from something else, like sports or anything, comes in the movies, there's a bit of an ego there. That, you know, they don't want to do auditions, they just want to get the part. And that was the exact opposite of what Dad was. He went to so many dang classes. He started at the very bottom of it and was willing to put in the work all over again. And he truly, truly loved it. It was something he really, really liked. He liked getting better at it. And towards the end of his career, he was truly becoming very, very good at it and learning how to actually become a new character. And, I mean, it's just so underappreciated, like we talked about. And if he had the chance, man, there would have been some awesome, awesome roles for him in the future. He was truly getting just phenomenal at it.
Well, at least he didn't have the embarrassing film career that Hulk Hogan did.
Well, I don't know. Have you ever seen Hell Comes to Frogtown? Remind him of that.
What? Your dad didn't enjoy doing that movie?
What, the last potent male on earth?
But I mean, let's be honest. It was, in hindsight, a little bit embarrassing.
What,
man?
I'd love to bring that one up to him.
Oh, yeah. He hated it when we brought it up, too. It's not one of his favorites.
But also working on that film is what got him the role in They Lived. So,
That's right.
At the end of the day, he was super grateful for it.
Well, he got to work with Sendel Bergman. Of course, it was in Conan the Barbarian. Well, how was it like for him to work with her?
You know, I actually haven't heard him talk that much. I know he spoke very highly of Meg Foster.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times, especially into the acting world, like, I love my dad to death, but he wasn't as up to par as to who was who in the acting world as he was the wrestling. You know, he knew everybody in the fighting world. But I tell you, you could put him in the same room as Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise, and it would take him a while to remember who you know what I mean? Like, he just wasn't.
Oh, yeah.
So, he probably had, knew about her, had a great experience with her. Probably didn't remember to tell me any stories, though. Because he would spend so much time with stars, and so many of them were fans of his, especially from that era of wrestling, that, you know, he just really didn't distinguish the difference between, you know, the Hollywood elite and some of the I don't know how to say it without sounding obnoxious, but he didn't have that same understanding of who's who like he did in the sports world.
Well, They Live is a great movie, and of course he had that famous line, "I'm here to kick ass and chew bubblegum, and I'm all out of bubblegum."
Oh, yeah.
And you got to work with John Carpenter, huh?
Pardon? What'd you say?
He got to work with John Carpenter.
Oh, yes. Yes. I mean, that whole movie, you know, my dad being in it aside, I'm a big sci-fi fan, and that whole movie, I think, was just brilliant. John Carpenter is obviously one of the best directors of our time, and, you know, especially for people who are fans of that genre. But that line, I'm all out of bubble gum, they were about to cut, and John was like, hey, why don't you come in the bank again and just say something, just say whatever you want to say, Roddy. And he had written that line down for wrestling probably a while ago, but he had stuck it in his mind, and he was very, very quick-witted, but he also was very good at, like, thinking of things on the road that he could use in a moment if he needed to. So that was actually something he was going to say in the ring. And it just, you know, John's like, say something. He's like, I'm here to kick ass and chew bubble gum, and I'm all out of bubble gum, you know? So it's amazing that became an iconic movie line when it could have just as easily been an iconic wrestling line had he used it in different situations.
Yeah, of course, Carpenter had done, of course, Halloween and Escape from New York and The Thing and stuff like that. And Piper being able to do They Live. Of course, he had that massive fight scene with Keith David, who, of course, 10 years later would be the dad in There's Something About Mary.
Yeah.
But, I guess that I don't know whether this is true. Is this down in the Guinness Book of Records, the longest fight scene, or am I wrong on that?
It was. I believe it was for a while. I don't know if it still stands, but for a while it was the longest fight scene. That's correct.
Yeah, for quite a while. I think I heard something about it possibly getting outdone in the recent years by some movie. I assumed they were trying to beat it, because why else would you make a fight scene that long?
Yeah, right.
I highly doubt whatever scene took its place had the same impact in the fight scene. I mean, having those two guys go at it and having somebody like Dad improv. I mean, you have to remember that this wasn't choreographed. You know, they were improving a fight scene, and a lot of it was very real. And just to have that kind of, you know, raw talent in the fighting world, improving on camera for a film, it's, you know, it doesn't happen a lot, and it was a really unique scene in that regard.
How
hard? I think that's why John chose to keep the whole scene and to have it be so long, because I'm sure initially they probably weren't thinking about it, but, you know, it was just so brilliantly done, and it was just such a rare film moment that, you know, how could you cut half of that out?
Right.
How hard was that fight sequence for them to do, especially on Keith David?
Well, I remember Dad telling me that he was, you know, told Keith not to worry, that he was a professional, and, you know, like, he would be, you know, he wouldn't try to, like, break his bones like he might in some of the fighting world. But yeah, I mean, Keith David obviously is a phenomenal talent, and, you know, I'm trying to think of more stories from that fight scene. Colt, do you remember any?
I do remember. Dad, obviously Dad was a great fighter and boxer, but Keith David was an incredibly good athlete and a big guy. And what happened was they were throwing punches past each other, but Keith kept catching Dad on the way back with his thumb. So Dad's like, hey, listen, let's try to get this done. Just hit me. And Dad, not knowing how great of an athlete Keith David was, all of a sudden Keith David's lighting Dad up. And Dad's sitting here, holding his tongue. Yeah, he's holding his tongue thinking, okay, I got to be tough here. But he's getting the crap kicked out of him during this. And Keith had no idea how strong he actually was.
Oh, I remember him telling me that now. Yeah.
I
worded it wrong, but that's exactly.
And of course, what you said that he really loved working with Meg Foster. Any stories there?
You know, for one, she's just a beautiful lady, and he really enjoyed her on set, just working with her as a person and as a talent. And she was somebody that I actually got to meet a few years ago. I went with my dad, and I wish I could remember the event, but it was some carpet event, and all I can remember is her eyes, man. In real life, they just look like they're CGI'd. They're so beautiful, like unreal. And it was really a sweet moment, because I don't know when the last time they saw each other, but, they talked for quite a while and they hugged, and it was just a very nostalgic, sort of moment for them. But I think that he, just as an actress, he always had a lot of respect for female in entertainment, whether it be acting or especially in wrestling. And I think that she was just one of those class acts that he, thought very highly of as an actress and as a person.
Okay. Yeah, they live
with... She was very tolerant of his new acting skills, because obviously he hadn't done that many movies at the time, and she was very helpful and patient as a more seasoned actress.
What do you think all these years later they live having this cult following?
I think it's super awesome. I would love them to do a reboot or something. I know not everybody loves reboots, but I think it's a great way to reintroduce the original film, and I just think with today's technology it could be really cool.
Oh yeah.
But I think it's one of those films that's sort of timeless. I mean, the whole film was really, about Reaganomics when you relook at it, and it's something that Dad was very passionate about. I mean, you have quotes of him saying that They Live was a documentary, not a fiction film, which of course is a little ridiculous. But he meant it in the sense that he does feel that there's strong elements of not necessarily aliens in the underworld, but there's strong elements of the brainwashing going on in our world, and with media how it is and everything how it is, that he felt strongly that film was very relevant today, and I think that's why it stood the test of time and still has a cult following.
What was your dad's thoughts on Bodyslam?
Man, I think Colt can answer this better, but I gotta say that Bodyslam was one of my favorite ones when I was little. I remember thinking that was so fun. I can't remember any specific stories. Colt, do you?
I can't either, but I do remember my favorite one that he did was Tag Team, which was a TV pilot with him and Jesse Ventura, where they were basically two retired wrestlers who couldn't get work anymore becoming police officers, and they were a team. And it was one of the greatest things you ever seen. If it's on YouTube or something, it's phenomenal.
I take it all back. I'm talking about Bodyslam. You're right. It's totally Tag Team that I was.
Is it? That was my favorite.
When I was little. If you haven't checked that out, I'm sure you can find it on the internet. It was amazing.
Oh, yeah. It's phenomenal. When you had foot surgery, Ariel, when you were a little kid, I remember me and you watching that over and over.
It was so good. I'm still upset that didn't get picked up.
I know.
Whatever, because it was so good.
Do you think Jesse Ventura would have made there was rumor that Jesse was going to run for presidency. What do you think kind of presidency he would have made?
I don't want to get too political, because I think it's important that people stay neutral in entertainment, because we're here to make people not worry about the real world and take them out of that. But with Trump president, I think it's anybody's game nowadays. Who knows? I mean,
couldn't have put it better myself.
I know Dad had a lot of respect for Jesse Ventura, so.
Yeah, he did a film that called Jungle Ground. I remember seeing this years ago. And, of course, he played, a cop that all of his partners ended up being wiped out, and he was captured, and he has to get out of this area. I seen it so long ago.
I remember it very vaguely. I definitely remember the DVD cover.
Yeah.
I remember that very well. I don't know if I ever saw the whole movie, because a lot of them, when we were younger, my mom or my dad wouldn't want us to watch them just because we were still kind of at a confused age. And
oh, yeah.
There's several of them that I still need to see. That being one of them, I think.
Oh, there was a scene in it that there was no way this could have been improvised, but I can't see why it wouldn't have been painful. The female lead, of course, playing his fiancée in the film, gets captured. And he's got her tied up on the couch, and he's got her mouth taped shut. And this guy puts tape over her nose, and I'm like, holy cow.
That's brutal.
That is brutal. I never forgot that. I never forgot that. But she looked like she was.
Did she die?
No. She passed out, and he got there in time. Yeah, but took care of killed the guy that did it, and freed her. But I never forgot that. So that would have been not a good way to go.
That is pretty brutal.
Now, there was a couple films I never heard of that your dad did. Like, he did Hard Time. He worked with Burt Reynolds. I did not know about this movie.
Yeah, they did, and Dad and Burt stayed friends for a long time after that. And Dad actually got to drive in the Bandit car, one of my favorite cars, with Burt, which is pretty cool. They stayed in touch after all that time.
Yeah.
Yeah. They had a lot of fun personal encounters after that. That I don't know. I don't want to say anything that Burt would not want me to say, but they definitely stayed friends for a long time.
And then another one I never heard of, Pro Wrestlers versus Zombies.
That was a newer one. That was pretty good.
I forgot about that. Yeah, I don't think that was one of his proud moments. I think that he mostly, if I remember correctly, there were some friend wrestlers of his doing it, and he basically was like, yeah, I'll do it. Like, they didn't want to work without him, so he didn't want to pull out, and so they just kind of decided to have fun with it and go with it.
Oh, yeah. And who better to kill zombies than Hacksaw and Roddy Piper? I mean, that's about as fun as you get.
Speaking of, if you enjoy that movie, you should check out the comic book, Roddy Piper Monster Killer, where he's Roddy Piper by day and Monster Killer by night. And Colt
absolutely.
Makes an appearance on it.
Oh,
yes, I do.
You can buy it off or find it off his website.
Right.
I got one more.
RoddyPiper.com?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
All right.
I got one more thing I want to bring up too, and you can reveal what you will about this. I know he had his podcast before he passed away, and I used to listen to that, and I enjoyed his interviews that he did, and I hear various things about this, so I want to hear from you guys the situation with Stone Cold Steve Austin. Because Steve Austin took a lot of heat.
Did he?
Yeah.
I felt like Dad took all the heat.
Yeah, I know.
Sometimes things get blown out of proportion, and in my opinion, this was one of them, and I think Dad would agree. I don't think that anything insulting was done on my dad's podcast. And
I agree. I don't think so either.
For whatever reason, I guess Stone Cold woke up in a bad mood that day and felt disrespected, which it is what it is. Honestly, I've always thought it would be kind of nice to go on his show and, sort of talk it out, because it did happen so quick before my dad passed. So yeah, I don't want to go into like gory details, but essentially, my dad lost his podcast for a while over that.
Right. Which is the funniest thing, because I've met coming from the wrestling world, both of them. The fact that was something that was so offensive was a little hard for me to understand. Oh yeah. Which is funny. I've met Stone Cold a handful of times, and he's been nothing but an upstanding human being. And their job is to piss each other and people off. So I think it, like all you said, got blown out of proportion so quick and fast that neither one could control it, Yeah, and it's not like my dad has ever, spoken poorly about him to me. Like, he's always said nice things about Stone Cold to me. So like, there's no animosity that like is hidden there. And then, and all of a sudden this like Joker, I don't even remember what it was. I think it was somebody came on the show and did an impression of him.
Yeah, I think it was Will Sasso, was it?
Maybe, that might have been it. I know it wasn't even my dad, and they're like, it was all in good fun, but I don't know. I just think it kind of surprised us all that coming from the wrestling world where way harsher stuff is done all the time.
Yeah.
Well, I heard the podcast, and I think it could have been handled in a more peaceful way. I'm going to say this. I lost respect for Steve Austin on that end, because I think he could have handled that in a much better way than what he did.
I agree. I think it would have been a lot of fun if they had one or the other on each other's podcast and talked it out that way and kind of had fun, getting into it sort of wrestling promo style. But I don't know. That's just me.
It would have been great if it started a feud or a war, and gone back and forth. It got so much publicity for both of them. It would have been a fantastic, just like back in the day, the war to settle the score, different federations, different places coming together. It would have been perfect.
and maybe I'm just a little bitter because it did happen so close to when our father passed.
Yeah.
And in my point of view, Stone Cold's show was great. It is great. I think it's still going. And it was doing great reviews and everything. And my dad was still trying to launch his podcast. I mean, he was getting a very good, steady following, but he still was trying to grow it. And he was in a big transitional place in his life. And so it was just kind of like, I don't know, one of those hits that he didn't really need right then, and it didn't seem necessary. It was just kind of, I don't know. It just put a sour taste in my mouth a little bit towards somebody that I had always looked up to. But I'm not hearing.
For sure.
Maybe he has his own side of the whole thing that I don't know. I just didn't understand how two wrestlers could be offended over something.
Yeah. Here's a question I do have. Did you guys see Billy Jack Haynes call out Steve Austin on this?
No.
I did not.
Oh, you got to look that up, because Steve Austin did a YouTube video or something where number one, he was upset about Piper's passing, and I guess he blamed Steve Austin for this Piper dying, but I think that's kind of trivial. But I guess there was a situation where he was calling Steve Austin a woman beater and this and that, and he was going off on the Piper thing, and Steve Austin Billy Jack Haynes challenged Steve Austin to a fight.
Wow. I'm going to have to look this up.
And I think that Steve Austin would lose that fight. But
well, it just happened so close to Dad passing that I think everyone's emotions are still kind of sour towards it all because of the timing. Honestly, to say that had a part in my dad passing is ridiculous. I mean, he had a lifestyle of a wrestler for his whole life.
Oh yeah.
But and I do have a lot of respect for Stone Cold. Do I still have you?
Yep.
Okay, I think we lost my brother.
Nope, I'm here.
Okay. But I think Bill.
My phone's being weird. I have a lot of respect for Stone Cold, but it was just the timing of it all, and it just was kind of a ridiculous thing in my opinion.
Well, Billy Jack Haynes, I think he saw so many people go, and even Roddy Piper has mentioned this. When Kurt Hennig passed away, when the Ultimate Warrior passed away, Randy Savage, he had stated so many wrestlers are dying way too young,
Yep.
Yeah. And I know that bothered Roddy Piper, and there's this whole controversy about the union and why wrestlers don't have it. And that's another thing Billy Jack Haynes brought. Like, Haynes laid into Steve Austin. He also laid into Vince McMahon, whom I know a lot of wrestlers hate Vince because I've heard so many comments. But yep, some of them are pretty entertaining. But no, I'm surprised you didn't hear the Billy Jack Haynes I think it's still online too, if you know. But
yeah, we'll have to check it out.
Oh yeah, we're both Googling it as soon as we're done here.
Yeah, but he just.
But it's hard when it was everyone's emotions were high during that time, so I'm not surprised necessarily.
Oh yeah.
That way.
Yeah. Well, how's your mom doing after all this? Because I know your mom. This is one of the things I loved about your dad. He stayed with your mom all these years. Like that's almost unheard of today,
You think that's impressive? Mom stayed with Dad for all those years.
Actually,
you know what it's like to be married to a wrestler? Come on.
Right?
I guess I should reverse that comment.
I think all of us as a family really looked up to our parents.
Oh yeah.
Marriage in a lot of ways, and Dad was a very loyal person. Like when he made a promise, he kept it. He was, he was very big on honor and things that we just don't really have in this lifetime or in this world anymore. And marriage was one of them. Both of my parents, marriage is never perfect, but they both worked very hard when it wasn't, and they had a lot of loyalty and faith towards each other.
Yeah, how's your mom doing since his passing?
She's doing okay. I mean,
yeah, she's a trooper, man.
dad is sort of like a planet, and everyone orbits around him. He's just a huge personality and so much charisma, and had such a big life, and that my mom, she was always orbiting around him, taking care of him, making sure. I honestly don't think he would have lived half as long as he did if it weren't for my mother. Like, she's the reason he lived those last 20 years.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think that she's still kind of lost as to what to do from here on out, because, she was planning on spending more time with him. So she's a strong woman, and she's doing as good as you can expect, but she's lost a big piece of her life, and it's hard to come back from that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. She's a true trooper, man. I mean, she put up with so much when he was alive, then he passed, and like Ariel said, I mean, all of our worlds kind of revolved around him, and losing him was, it was not just, we didn't just lose a father. We, we lost a lot more. I mean, everything we did was for him and to help the family.
Yeah.
We're very family-orientated, and so all of our worlds were shocked. I mean, Mom's most of all. And she's a true trooper, man. She's a Piper through and through. She's tough as hell.
When you have somebody like our dad in your family as your parent, and I'm sure a lot of other, Hollywood kids or wrestling kids can relate, it really is like losing a part of your identity. And, even to this day, I'm not me. I'm always introduced as, oh, this is Roddy's daughter, Ariel. And it's just such a big part of who you are and who you've grown up to be, that when that person is taken away, it's sort of like a big empty spot in a puzzle. And you're like, well, what do we fill this with? Not to diminish anybody else's losses in life, because anytime you lose a family member, it's terrible. But I think with somebody whose life impacts yours in every way, your career, and, the people around you view you as that person, part of that person and everything like that, it's kind of got a different toll on it.
Yeah. How did your mom like doing the wife swap thing? Because I know the Ric Flair disguise moment just cracked me up.
What's funny? She hated it right up until the minute where they started shooting, and then she had fun. Like, she hates being on camera. She could not be less like our dad. Like, she wants no attention on herself and was just dreading doing it, but was taking one for the team. And then as soon as they actually started shooting, she had a blast. She really loved spending time with Rick. She was connecting with him, and she was, being a wife of my dad, and both of them being such rambunctious guys, especially back in the early days, and my God, the partying and all of that. She had a lot that she could talk to him about and relate to him with, or he could confide in her on, because, all of that. So I think as soon as it actually started shooting, she had a blast.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And like I said earlier, Uncle Rick, right? She's known him for many, many, many years, and, they've been friends forever. So going there really felt like, a second family. I mean, sure, it was a definitely different lifestyle for her, but, I mean, I don't think there's anybody we could have done that episode with that she wouldn't have been more comfortable with, even for how hard being on camera is.
It's not like it was a complete stranger. I mean, it's Rick.
Exactly.
Yeah. How are your two...
Her dad was nervous.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to send my wife over to Rick's now.
Yeah, your dad couldn't get any peace, he couldn't. Yeah, I'm just wondering too, how are your two sisters holding up?
Well, this interview is not going to air for a little while, correct?
That's right.
All right, my little sister just had her first child.
About what, 30 or maybe 3 hours ago?
Yep. It's not on social media yet, but by the time that this interview's out, it'll be out.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
So she is married with her first kid now. It's obviously bittersweet for all of us since Dad's not here.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
And then my older sister, she's just a super mom. She has so many. I just say she has infinite kids because it's too hard to count them all, but they're all freaking adorable.
Oh, wow.
So she has a very good life on the East Coast and moves a lot with her husband. And yeah.
Okay. Well, here I need to know before we conclude this. I know Colt, you're into. I don't know how to word this. What are you doing now? I know you're involved in something to do with wrestling, right?
A lot of underwater basket weaving, actually.
Oh, okay.
No. So I fought pro or MMA for a long time, and then now for about 4 years I've been doing pro wrestling, and I actually just got to Las Vegas, Nevada, where I'm helping a startup company. I'm helping develop it called Classic Wrestling Revolution, which I'll be wrestling for full time.
Okay.
But we're in the beginning stages and a lot of hard work going into it right now. We wrote a book called Rowdy, the Roddy Piper story. You can get it at, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, heck, eBay probably.
Yeah.
Shameless plug.
Yeah. But do you have any moves that your dad taught you that you use when you're in the ring? Like anything you transfer over?
Absolutely. So obviously I've used the sleeper before, but I was trained the old school way. So when in pro wrestling, at no time in a fight am I going to go off the top rope, do a double front flip, and try to land on you in my stomach. That's not what I'm going to do in a fight. I'm going to try to fight, yes. So I do a lot of stuff Dad used to do because it's true to what we are, and we are fighters. So if you watch me wrestle, you're going to get reminded a lot of Dad, but you're going to see a lot of cool new stuff too. So I've done anything from Superman punches to sleeper holds, the whole shebang. But what I always try to stay true to is I'm a wrestler and a fighter, first and foremost. So that's what you're going to see. I do a little bit different style of wrestling than you're used to these days. I think it's a little bit of mix of my MMA, a little bit of today's wrestling, and a lot of Dad's time of wrestling. It's honestly, it's a pretty cool mashup, I think.
Do you do the eye poke?
Just adding in there, if you haven't seen Colton fight, I highly recommend Googling it, and there's some matches on YouTube because it really is. He's a phenomenal talent. I'm not just saying that because he's my brother, because honestly, as his sister, I'm always rooting against him. But he really is a phenomenal talent.
Do you do the eye poke?
You can see some of that style he's talking about, and he just brings the fire to the ring that his dad used to bring, and it's really, really sweet for me because I see a lot of Dad in him.
I love you too, Ariel.
Do you do the eye poke?
No. I've done the eye poke, absolutely. Dad used to always tell me, if you don't cheat, you don't care enough. So it's a good life lesson.
Well, Ariel, I understand you're into, you want to get into acting, and you've also done singing. I'd like to know a little bit more about that.
Well, yeah. So I've been doing acting out here in LA for a while now. A lot of indie films. I kind of took a break after my father passed, and we wrote. And I'm currently working on my first album, as well as I can't really go too far into it, but if you Google, there are some articles and stuff. I've been in touch with a lot of the wrestling legends' daughters, and we are kind of starting our own female league.
Okay.
So you'll hear more about that as time goes along. I'm not saying that I will be wrestling personally, but it's a very exciting project for all of us, so you'll have to look out for that as well.
Oh, we could see you put Tamina Snuck on a sleeper hold.
I don't know if I'll be doing that personally, but I'm definitely going to be heavily involved in the whole process. And, and actually this album that I'm making is very bittersweet because my dad and I shared a very big music bond. A lot of people didn't know that he was a great musician. Mm-hmm. And we were going to do a duet on it together. And so for me, this whole album means a lot just because he passed before I could finish it.
I like some of the videos you put up too, like the one where he did the Christmas one where he put that poor guy in the sleeper hold.
I love that one. Oh, he had a blast doing that too. That was a fun one. Every Christmas I watch it.
And then you put a clip on there that I had never seen before. I'd never seen Ebenezer Piper before. I got a kick out of that.
Me too. And it's so funny because now, I kind of personally took it a little bit for granted when he was alive, like all of his archived footage and just like some of the older stuff, just because, I got to live with him. I knew him and it wasn't something that I was desperately seeking out. And now that he's passed, I still get all of these fans sending me videos and stuff that, just when you think you've seen everything, they'll send you some old footage from the 70s. And it means a lot. And I think Colton's experienced a lot of this too. Just the fans since he's passed have been really, really great and treated us really well. And I really appreciate every time someone sends an old photo or an old video to me, and I'll post them on my pages all the time. I love it.
We're very unique in that aspect of that. Dad's gone, but if we miss him or I miss him anytime, I can Google him and see a great video of him, which, it's a lot of people don't get when their father or loved ones pass away, which has been phenomenal. You miss Dad, you know what? I'm going to go on YouTube, and I'm probably going to find something new. which is
Yeah.
pretty dang cool.
We've both definitely realized how lucky we are to have that. When so many people have just a photo or a memory of their loved ones, we have a lot on the internet and a lot of ways to see and hear them again and see the things we loved about them. So we're very lucky in that regard.
Here's a curious question I have. You've obviously, sometimes you're on the road with your dad and whatnot. Is there any wrestlers outside your dad that made an impression on you upon meeting you?
For me, there was I met a lot of them, but one of them that I really remember would be Chyna.
I was going to say Chyna, too.
Were you? Oh, that's awesome. This is why, because I used to be in that locker room a lot, and there's a lot of guys coming in and out of there, and it's real scary when you're a young kid. And I was sitting there one time, and it was a place I'd never been before. A bunch of new wrestlers had come in, guys I didn't know. And Chyna had walked by me. She was real hot at the time, so she was working a lot. And she went by me about 6 times. And on the 7th time, she brought me this little plush doll of hers, and she gave it to me. And nothing was really said. She just goes, "Here you go." But she had noticed that I was having a hard time back there. And all I needed was, somebody to notice me kind of a thing. And she took the time to do it. She didn't have to, but she took the time to go get something like that and do it and do that for me. And then meeting up with her years later, Dad's funeral was just, again, she had such a big heart, and it was such a great lady.
I couldn't agree more. I think the longest hug of my life I've ever had was with Chyna at our dad's funeral.
Yep.
She had such a warm presence and was just so loving. And then obviously as a woman, it's hard not to look up to her and her career in wrestling. I mean, she did what a lot of women struggle to do in that field. She was amazing, and she was just a very kind, warm person. I don't know how to say it better than what Colt did, but Chyna for sure.
Absolutely.
It's sad we just lost her not too long ago too.
Yes, it is.
Do you guys, what did your dad think of all the memorabilia? I got to tell you, I've got a lot of your dad's memorabilia home. I've got a lot of the action figures, and I think the one I don't have, I'd like to eventually get, is like those. Do you remember the old rubber ones?
We have those.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't have one of those, but I've got the Jax one. That was a really good one of your dad. Yeah. I must have 2 or 3 Roddy Piper action figures home.
Oh, we have tons. I mean, one of my favorite things as a kid was having my dad beat up my G.I. Joe, which a lot of kids don't get, man. But it's so cool to have that kind of stuff. And memorabilia. I mean, I wear hot rod shirts and hot rod hats all day long, man. It's just because we've had them, so many of them for so long. It's just such a cool thing, man. Not a lot of people get to have memorabilia of their dad, and that's one thing we definitely get.
I remember one of my favorites was, it might have been WCW days, I can't remember, but it was Roddy Piper with missile-launching bagpipes.
Oh, I love that one.
I just thought that was awesome. I was like, Dad, why don't your bagpipes have missiles come out of them?
Right?
I thought that was so funny. And then the old rubber ones that you're talking about, he had signed those before even our little sister was born, and they had been on our fireplace mantle to all of us kids for years and years and years and years. And we always wanted to play with them or open them or something, and my mom was always like, no, those are for when your dad passes someday. I want you to have those. And so it was actually really, really bittersweet when he actually passed that I've never wanted something less,
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Well, you know what? We're coming up almost 100 minutes on this interview, and I apologize for taking up so much of your time, but this means so much to me because I've been a fan of your dad's for so long. I was just wondering, I got the book Rowdy home. When you guys wrote that, of course, prior to your dad passing, right?
Post.
Oh, it was after. I thought you started writing it before, or he wanted to write.
Our dad had started writing it before.
Okay.
And he started the project, and unfortunately, he didn't, get to complete it. And when he passed, Craig Payette, his editor, contacted us, and he had gone on the road with Dad for writing this book and interviewed family and he asked Colton and I to take over the project.
Okay. Was it a difficult project to do? Like I know getting all this information together, but like how difficult was this to put together?
One of the most difficult things I've ever had to do, honestly.
Yeah. Aside from the obviously emotionally, it was incredibly hard, but also it kind of helped us through the mourning process because it happened so quickly after he passed.
And it forced you to face it.
Yeah, and also, but it was, there's a chapter in the book called The Jesus Years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an inside joke we had within the family because there's this part in the Bible where, like, Jesus is born, and then you don't hear from him for a long time, and then all of a sudden he's in his 30s. You're like, well, what else happened? And
Yeah.
he had that same gap in his life where he, he was young, and then he went on the road, and all of his life was muddled. I don't even think he knew, what exactly happened in, like, some of those formidable years because of all his memories and his hits to the head and everything. And so we struggled a lot to piece together, especially those chapters, and we really tried to make it factual and pay tribute to Dad because he was an incredible person. Even if you're not into wrestling, Roderick George Toombs lived an amazing life, and we really wanted to, like, do him honor and justice and also have that timeline. But it was not easy to track down those stories and those people, and there's still some people that we could not find to save our lives. We have no idea if they're alive, if they're dead, if they're in Mexican jail. We have no idea. There were some people during key times that we could not find. It was not an easy process.
Not at all.
Well, I thought it was cool that your dad's Canadian, just like me. You two aren't Canadian, are you?
I have dual citizenship.
Okay.
Colton is not, which is why I am your favorite author in this.
I got the book home, but I would love to get an autographed copy of it from you two if it's possible.
Absolutely.
And I'd even be willing to pay for it. I have no problem doing that.
Are you kidding me? You've done us just having us on your show. Without you guys, the people that sit there and listen to us chat and be stupid, without you guys, there'd literally be nothing. We wouldn't have anything. So we would be happy to send you a copy, man.
Absolutely. When we get off the phone or whatever, I'll give you an address and mail us a book, and I'll mail it back autographed.
Okay. Do you want me to just send you my mailing address when I get to my email?
Perfect.
Yeah, I would love an autographed copy of both of you. It was just an honor, and I really appreciate the time you two put into this. I know that was hard. Anytime losing a parent is definitely going to be hard. So, but like I said, this was something I had to do. I wanted to do this tribute interview, and it's funny because 1 year ago today, I did another tribute interview. I had Alfred Hitchcock's granddaughter on here, and he changed the way I looked at movies. And of course,
that's really. I'm a big Hitchcock fan. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's on my YouTube channel too. If you look up Greg Gilbert and Python's Paradise, my channel is on there, and I've got over almost 60 of my interviews on there, and you're number 145, so I've done a lot. I've done almost 80, and we're this year, and we're only in May.
My goodness.
Yeah, I've been very busy at this, but I had to do this tribute interview because I was so sad when your dad had passed, and like I said, I loved watching him. I loved watching his promos, and like I said, it all started with those Hostess chip bags back prior to WrestleMania 3, and that six-man tag elimination match takes us just full circle.
Well, thank you so much for having us on. We really appreciate it, and we appreciate the tribute to Dad. It's things like this that help him live on.
Absolutely. It was an honor for you to have us, sir, or for us to be here, sir. Thank you so much.
I was wondering if before you go, if I could get you two to do a plug for my show.
Absolutely.
Yes. Of course, just state your names, and my show is called Python's Paradise. My name, of course.
Python's Paradise.
Yep, Python's Paradise.
You want us to do them separate or like together?
However you want. Of course, my name's Greg Gilbert, and I'm in New Brunswick, Canada. If you can remember all that.
All right, Python's Paradise. Greg Gilbert?
Greg Gilbert. Yep, Greg Gilbert. Okay. And we're in New Brunswick, Canada.
Here, why don't we give them separate ones, Ariel, so he gets extra bumpers?
Sure.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
All right, you go for it, Ariel.
Oh, thank
Whenever
you.
you're ready. Oh, yeah, no problem.
Hi, my name is Ariel Teal Toombs, daughter of the legendary Roddy Piper, and you are listening to Python's Paradise with Greg Gilbert in fucking Canada somewhere. What is it?
Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada.
Did I get it right up in Gilbert?
You can try it again.
Python Paradise, Greg Gilbert, New Brunswick, Canada.
Brunswick. I have a speech impediment. It's not my fault. Okay. Hi, my name is Ariel Teal Toombs, daughter of the late Roddy Piper, and you are listening to Greg Gilbert on Colt, you go.
All right, give me a sec. So Greg Gilbert, Python Paradise, New Brunswick, Canada, correct?
That's right.
All right, here we go. This is Colt Toombs, son of Hall of Fame wrestler Roddy Piper. If you're in New Brunswick, Canada, you better be listening to Python's Paradise because it's the hottest ticket on the air.
Absolutely. Now, Ariel, you want to go up bat again?
Colt, you missed his name.
I can do it again.
Keep going.
All right. Hi, my name is Ariel Teal Toombs, daughter of the late Roddy Piper. You are in fucking Jesus. I don't even want to do this. Let me try one more time. I can't speak right now.
If you want me to do another one with your name, sir, I can give Ariel a second. If that's okay, sir.
Sure, you go right ahead.
All right, Greg Gilbert. All right, here we go. This is Colt Toombs, son of legendary wrestler Roddy Piper. If you're in New Brunswick, Canada, you better be listening to Python Paradise because that's where Greg Gilbert is, and he's the best on the air.
Oh, that was great. You got it now, Ariel?
We'll find out. Well, wait, I haven't had coffee. It's not my fault. All right.
She's also in El Paso right now on like half an hour's sleep, okay?
All right, here we go. Hi, my name is Ariel Teal Toombs, daughter of the late Roddy Piper. You're in New Brunswick, Canada. You are listening to Python's Paradise with Greg Gilbert. Hope you have a great hour.
There you go. Actually, it's going to be a great 2 hours.
Good enough. I have a speech impediment. It's bad.
You did perfect, Ariel.
Well, you know what? I thank you so much. Thank you both. We're celebrating the career and the life of Roddy Piper, one of my personal all-time favorite wrestling personalities. And, he was just terrific. And I can't say it any more than that. And I thank you, Colt, for coming on here and talking to me. And I thank you, Ariel, for coming on here and talking to me as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. And you have Ariel's contact. If you need anything else from us, sir, please do not hesitate to ask. We're here for you, whatever you need.
Thank you so much. You two both on Facebook?
Yeah.
You mind if I add you?
I'm on Twitter, at Colt Toombs on Twitter.
Okay. You mind if I add you on Facebook, Ariel?
Yeah, go for it. Ariel Teal Toombs on Facebook.
Okay, I'll do that.
I'm also at Ariel Teal on Twitter.
Sure. Yeah, I'm on both of them, so I'll do that. Well, God bless both of you.
God bless you, sir. Thank you so much.
No problem. Have a good night.
All right, you as well.
Bye-bye.